Welcome back, everybody, to the School Leadership Show. With me, as always, co-host, fantastic co-host, Jen David Lang.
Hey there, Mike. Good to see you. Glad to be here.
Good to see you. Now, obviously, Jen, it is your star power and influence that landed us today's guest, a man who in education needs absolutely no introduction, Jim Knight.
Woo. Welcome, Jim Knight. We're so glad you're here.
Hey, I'm excited to be here, but I don't know about all this star power stuff. It seems way overstating the case, but I'm happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
So we appreciate it. So Jen, you want to start us off because it was your suggestion to bring Jim on.
Sure. So I am summarizing Jim's book for this month's issue of The Main Idea, and I usually try to stick to books that are, from this year and last year. I really try to stick to current education books, but I was remembering back to Jim's 2016 book, Better Conversations, and I was just feeling like, even though he clearly wrote that before the pandemic, that it would be an incredibly useful book to talk about now. And then when we emailed back and forth, Jim thought so too. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit. We're going to be talking about better conversations, coaching ourselves and each other to be more credible, caring, and connected. Can you talk a little bit about why you wrote it originally and why you agreed that it might be good for school leaders to look at now?
Yeah, the book kind of, honestly, when I wrote the book, I didn't really feel qualified. I thought the person writing the book should be really good at conversations, and I wasn't. I still don't think I'm there. I've got a lot of growth to do, but it kept writing itself, and then I had this conversation with my wife, and she said, maybe you're the perfect person because I don't think any of us feel we've perfected it, and she also said, you're right, you're not that great at conversations, but nonetheless. So it's of any book I've written, it's the one that kind of wrote itself. And for me, it was about trying to get better in the way I have conversations and then sharing that, because conversations are so vital to fulfilling life. Your life is lived in conversation. Best days of your life, worst days of your life almost always involve a conversation. And then I think right now, these are particularly difficult and interesting times. Difficult because it's kind of like it's people are dealing with stuff they're unconscious of. Some people have been really touched in really difficult ways, lost maybe family members or friends, and then everybody is just dealing with stuff, and so they're maybe not feeling like they're at their best, but they're not sure why. And I think a lot of what we're dealing with right now has to do with sort of hopefully post-pandemic stuff. So that's why I think it's important. I mean, today we really need each other, and it's a little harder to have there's other things going on too. It's not just a pandemic, but it's a tough time to always have good conversations.
When I looked at the habits to improve conversations, or maybe we want to start before that and talk about the beliefs. And because as I was reading it, just like you said, Jim, I was thinking, man, if on a macro political scale, people could follow these directions, we'd be in a much better spot.
Well, yeah, I think you could just take one habit and it would move things forward. If you were better at being a witness to the good in other people, or sharing positive information in a healthy way, or building emotional connection, fostering trust, listening and asking questions. I mean, all those things would move us forward. That old, I'm probably going to misstate it, but Maya Angelou's famous statement where she says, do the best you can until you know better. And when you know better, do better. The trouble is I know better. I don't always do better, but I can keep trying to do my best to improve. So that's this spirit in which I wrote the book, was that, every interaction is a chance to try to do better.
And I think, we always think about leadership as, everything you do as a leader either builds trust or takes away trust, every single action. And really, most of that is through conversation, right? So I think every conversation, you're either building trust or detracting from it. And, you know, when I looked at the second part of your of the title, right? Coaching ourselves and each other to be more credible, caring, and connected, these C's. A lot of us were talking about these C's during the pandemic and how important they were. And in fact, Jim, when you mentioned the Maya Angelou quote, I had used that in something I wrote. I thought you were going to talk about a different quote of hers where she said something to the effect of, I will learn that people will forget what you said. They will forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And
Right.
I think the conversation is a lot about how are we making others feel, parents, students, teachers, other administrators.
Yeah, I'm increasingly convinced that it's about stepping away from self-interest and doing our best to be the best we can be for other people, and compassion and empathy and those kinds of things. It's conceptual, but you're also compassionate and empathetic towards yourself. I don't know if you can be empathetic towards yourself, but you should treat yourself with the same kind of kindness you would show to others, I think. And part of that is, well, today was a bad day, but tomorrow's another chance. And to me, one of the great adventures of life is to try to have better relationships, better friendships, better conversation. We're all a product of our parents and our history and all these different things, but we can get better. I mean, everybody agrees we can get worse. So if we can get worse, we can get better.
And I was also interested that, as, probably the best well-known name in coaching in the field of education, you didn't call this book Better Coaching. You specifically called it Better Conversations. So were you imagining it not just in terms of coaching, but also, walking down the hallways and talking to each other in schools? Or why did you pick Better Conversations over Better Coaching?
Yeah, it's not a coaching book. It is a book about conversation, and conversation everywhere, not just conversation at work. But I mean, I'm not a marriage therapist, but conversations with your significant other, if you have a partner, and your kids, and, trying to find, given the inescapability, I guess, of conversation, trying to have better conversations, because a better conversation is going to be a better life. But I also think there's something about who you are at work and who you are outside work are not ever completely separate. It's pretty hard to be a really compassionate and kind person at work and not be at home. I mean, I think your lives overlap, and if you're able to have better relationships at home, you'll probably have better relationships at work. So I think there's a sense in which, when it comes to conversation, it's pretty everywhere.
Well, and I think too, you bring up a good point, Jim. Yeah, we all have so much vigilance and willpower throughout the day, and you use it up, and then when you get home, it is harder sometimes to be nice and to be kind. But I think, thinking about some of the principles in here, and then also what Jen and I love about a lot of the books that she chooses is sort of the words to help, almost the script to help people know what to say and what not to say. And I found that super interesting.
It's funny. I feel like I'm better at home than I am at work right now these days for some reason. And of course, my partner Jenny would probably say that's the best you can do. But I do feel like I'm almost the other way around. I don't know if it's a COVID thing or not, but I mean, I'd like to be much better everywhere. And what I do believe strongly is all that matters is this conversation right now. All that matters is this moment with this person. What happened in the past, I'm not defined by it. I'm not defined by other people's perceptions of me. I'm defined in this moment. I'm defined by in this moment. And this idea that I'm not a good listener, or I don't ask good questions, or I can't be compassionate. Yes, you can. Maybe you can't do it all the time, but you can try now. And maybe you can't, but you can try. And so I feel like, don't worry about the future. Don't worry about the past. And maybe tomorrow you won't be a good listener, and maybe yesterday you weren't. But right now, with this 10-year-old, I can really listen carefully. So I feel like, in a sense, we limit our potential by defining ourselves a certain way. I'm I'm not good at this or not good at that. But really in the moment, that's all that matters. The moment right in front of you with the person. So to me, that's what gives me hope. And I mentioned this briefly, but we can't let other people define us because they'll say, oh, well, you're this kind of person, or you're not really this, or you're this. No, I mean, we always have potential to be better. And all that really matters is the time right in front of us.
I think that's really powerful and it's really hopeful. And I think, for listeners at home who are like, why are you talking about relationships outside of school? I think we're one person, right? When you have better conversations at home, you bring that person to work, right? When you have better conversation skills at work, you bring that home. And, it's a muscle, and it's, you clearly say that these are skills or something that can be learned. So why not practice them in both arenas, both in and out of the school? But before we jump in, I know Mike wants to jump into strategies, but I really wanted to start with the beliefs, Mike, or did you want to add something first?
You're doing great, Jen.
A lot of books about education, jump into here's strategies you can try these strategies. But I really like, Jim, that you ground better conversations in 6 beliefs, and you can't really have better conversations unless you adopt these beliefs. And so, I don't know. I have them in front of me. They probably should come from you because you wrote them, but I don't know if you have them in front of you, if you would be willing to share the 6 beliefs for our listeners.
Yeah, see if I can remember them. I don't have them in front of me, but the first one is equality. And one way to put equality is it's the opposite of white supremacy. It's the belief that no group or no individual is more valuable than another. You can lose respect for a human being, but as I've learned from Floyd Cobb and John Cranapple, every human being has dignity, and you can't take that dignity away. They all have value. And so I think equality's kind of got a bad name because there's that famous meme where it's equality on one side and equity on the other side, and they're both watching a baseball game. But to me, equality is the belief that every human being has the same value. And you can't really have equity unless you believe that. It doesn't mean you treat people the same. In fact, if you really believe every person is of equal value, then you should be dismantling structures that inhibit people's capacity to have equity. And you should be recognizing the individuality of every person. So to me, equality is an a priori notion for equity. And then the second question is that I think people should have a lot of autonomy. I don't know if I have these in order, but the first reality is people do have a lot of autonomy. We're really good at nodding our head yes and doing nothing. And so just because you tell somebody something doesn't mean they're going to do it. And in coaching, we really believe in alignment, trying to line ourselves up with other people and having them identify what they want to work on and then providing support. That's how I would see coaching. Coaching is not about me getting buy-in. Coaching is about helping the person identify a powerful thing they can do for students and then helping them achieve it. And that involves choice. We're not motivated by other people's choices for us. People can say they are and say people should do it, and I'm just going to tell them what to do. But most likely, if you don't give people choice, you're going to get compliance at best. You're not going to get a deep level of commitment. And then another one is that I believe that it's important to hear what other people have to say. And a simple way to put that is if the other person doesn't think I'm listening, they're right. Because you should feel like you've been heard when the other person's listening. And it involves external and internal components, but when you really listen to a person, they should know they've been heard. I mean, you've probably had the annoying experience, maybe you've been this person, of someone saying, you didn't hear a word I said, and then you rattle back everything they said. And actually, they're right. I wasn't listening, because if I was listening, they wouldn't have to say that. And then a really key one for me is that, well, they're all key, but we shouldn't moralistically judge other people. And this is not to say we shouldn't discern reality or we should hide from reality. I think to move forward, growth involves seeing reality clearly. But moralistic judgment is when I add a pejorative kind of sticker to the comment. You only do that because you're lazy. You only care about yourself. You sure love to talk, or you wouldn't believe what I saw in that person's classroom today, or any number of little ways, verbally or non-verbally, where we communicate, I think that other person is a bad person. And it's hard not to do it. It's fun for some reason, or at least it gives us some kind of, maybe we're not as bad as that person, so we feel lifted up by putting another person down. But every time you moralistically judge another person, what you do is you kill the opportunity for learning and you kill intimacy. It's hard to be close to somebody when you're rolling your eyes when they're talking. And Michael Fullan says a lot of ways to roll your eyes that don't involve your eyes. And so the opposite of moralistic judgment is appreciation. To look for the good in the other person and communicate that you see the good. To demonstrate I have faith in you, I believe in you, would be the opposite of that. And then conversation should be back and forth. It's essentially a dialogue is what we're talking about. And a back and forth conversation where two equals are sharing ideas with equal energy. If there's no energy in the classroom or in the conversation, it's not an equal conversation. It's one person and one person sending, the other person receiving. A true equal conversation is energizing. And it probably involves an openness on my part to hearing what the other person has to say. Communicating that I believe in that other person. And an attitude of benevolence towards the other person. They can tell that I want what's good for them. And Paulo Freire in Pedagogy of the Oppressed, he said those three things, humility, faith, and he calls it love, but benevolence, he said they're necessary prerequisites for trust. There's no trust. If you're only interested in yourself and you don't want to hear my opinions, or you don't believe in me, or you don't have my best interests at heart, it's going to be hard for me to trust you. But if I can see those three things, you really want what's best for me. Wow. And you really do want to hear my opinion, and you really believe in me, well, then maybe I can trust you. And there's not much that comes from a conversation that doesn't have trust. It's not going to go that far. And then the last one, conversation should be life-giving. And maybe you'd say, well, what is a life-giving conversation? I'll just give you a really concise definition. You ever had a conversation that sucked the life right out of you? Well, it's the opposite of that. It's one that gives you energy and makes you feel hope and positive about the future. And I would say the power of beliefs is they help you with ambiguous situations. They help you think about what's happening. And you go, well, I know if I don't have a benevolent, I have to remind myself sometimes that when I go into this conversation, it's about that other person. It's not about me. I have to have that attitude of benevolence. That's the idea.
By the way, Jim, I forgot to ask you at the top of the show, where does this podcast find you?
I am at home. This is Lawrence, Kansas, home of the Jayhawks, right here.
All right.
Just down the road from the University of Kansas.
Okay, very cool. So thinking about those beliefs, and I know you've coached and worked with many leaders over the course of your career. What have you found to be effective in terms of transmitting these beliefs or getting administrators to buy in? And then I guess the follow-up to that is, what do the strategies look like to do that? Because I think that's, we want to make sure that folks, kind of know, where does this lead? I mean, it sounds, it makes total sense, but where are we headed?
Well, I would say if you say, yeah, quality sounds good, that sounds nice, then the question becomes, what does it look like? And it probably looks like, I'll just give you two examples, but I think everybody has to answer that question for each of the beliefs. But if I'm interrupting other people, then I think I'm more important than that. And when you're in a position with structural power, people will let you interrupt them. But if I really believe they're equal, they're valuable. Now, granted, I have a different role than they do. I have more power. But if structural power. But if I really believe theirs is important to me, I shouldn't be interrupting them when they talk. And then the second thing would be moralistic judgment. I would say, just with respect to equality, if I'm moralistically judging people, what I'm really literally saying is I'm better than them. I wouldn't dress like that. I wouldn't talk like that. I wouldn't do that. I mean, what are they thinking? And I'm putting myself up here and down there. So if I really believe in equality, just to pick the first one, then that should be reflected in actions. And if you go down each belief, there's going to be certain things like if I really believe the other person's voice is important, then I probably shouldn't be going in expecting what my job is just to tell them what to do. If I really believe in dialogue, then I should ask myself, do I really want what's best for this person? Am I really, is it easy for me to do that? Or do I sometimes forget about the person and worry more about me or about bigger issues that don't necessarily, and so I think you can go through each belief and look at questions. For example, life-giving, the question could be something like, am I more of a judger or a learner? Do I expect to learn from this person? But we'll have a more life-giving conversation. And when you read about some of the most talented and intelligent people in the world, what they do is they expect to learn from every person they interact with. And I'm not on that scale. But if I want to be like them, part of the reason they're like the way they are is because they look at every opportunity for learning. So I think the first thing is to ask yourself, what does it look like? What does it really look like? And then do I live that out? And are my actions reflecting it? And then I think for each of the beliefs, there's certain habits, but I'll just pick one to start with, which is listening. And this isn't my idea. I just learned this from Amanda Ripley, who I interviewed on our podcast just a few weeks ago. And she clearly had an impact because I brought it up in just about every conversation since then. But she has this wrote a book called High Conflict. And she has this concept called looping. And it's simple. I really like powerful, simple strategies. I'm really interested in how we can do simple things that you can actually develop as a habit that aren't really complicated. And her simple thing is, when you listen to a person at an appropriate time, pause and say, well, let me tell you what I think I hear you saying. Paraphrase back what you've heard. And then this is the kicker. And then you say, do I have that right? And she said, when you say, do I have that right? If you have it right, you always get the same answer. And the answer is exactly. And if you don't have it right, then they'll clarify it for you and you can learn. But that simple sentence, do I have that right? You can, and I've tried it out mostly with my 10-year-old. You can feel it in the conversation. You can feel something happens where the person feels like, wow, they really are listening to me. And it holds you accountable, because I can't say, do I have that right, if I haven't been listening, if I've been thinking about my fantasy hockey team or something. It's not going to go very far. So in order to ask the question, do I have that right, I have to listen so I can paraphrase. So that's an example of listening. But I mean, there's all kinds of different things we could talk about along that lines. But the 10 different habits, they all relate to different kind of communication strategies for sure.
Before we might get into a few of those, one very simple but powerful idea that I keep coming back to from your book, Jim, is you talk about the power of videotaping yourself. And now that we all have, we all have recorders in our pockets with our phones, and you give an example like if you ask most people, they look at the 6 beliefs and they say, sure, I believe my conversation partner is my equal. Sure, I believe I want to hear what others have to say. But then you give an example of a coach watching herself in the video, and yet she sees herself, I don't remember the specific example, but say, interrupting. And so I think that's a very powerful tool that just about any school leader or district leader listening to this can do. You don't even have to ask someone else to observe you. You could just videotape yourself and then look at some of the habits and the strategies that are in this book and see, well, which ones are you violating? And that's a way to bridge that connect between what you know or believe in as a belief, but what you're actually doing.
Yeah, there's so much packed into that. First off, very few people have a clear picture of what it looks like when they do what they do. There's a whole bunch of reasons for that. One of them is perceptual errors. We have confirmation bias, habituation, all these little errors that interfere with our ability to see clearly. That's why teaching is so beneficial for teachers to watch themselves on video. And the second thing is defense mechanisms. We explain away the problem. Well, it's their fault, not my fault, or we minimize the problem. It's all to say, we don't see reality very clearly. There's a reason why every middle school football team in America watches game film, because it's powerful, because seeing yourself. And I actually think watching yourself on video is probably way more powerful than somebody observing you and giving you feedback. And you can use it in all kinds of ways. But we did a study with coaches in Beaverton, Oregon. And I spent 3 years with them, 30 days a year on this study. And at the end of it, I said, okay, now we spent all this time together. what's been most useful of all these things that I've spent 30 days each year, 90 days with you for 3 years? And they said, no offense, Jim, but it wasn't you. It was watching ourselves on video. When we saw ourselves on video, we could see how much we interrupted, how little all kinds of things. And it just radically alters your behavior. And I'll just say one more thing. When I was writing the book, my partner, Jenny, she wrote the reflection guide that goes with it. And so we had to try out all the different things, and there's different forms, and you video record yourself in conversations. And so we both weren't really entirely keen on this, but we watched each other in these conversations. And now it's gotten to the point that, fortunately, we have a great marriage, but every once in a while, there'll be a testy point where you're discussing something and it's not going well. And Jenny will say, let's record this conversation. You're much nicer when we record the conversation. It becomes like a weapon she pulls out as the video to save the conversation. So it is a
great idea.
It is powerful.
That's a great idea.
And people would say, do you really want me to sit down with my wife or my husband, my partner, and record? Well, people spend millions and millions on Pelotons and all kinds of ways to get in shape. Here is maybe the most important relationship in your family. You're not willing to video record the conversation. And I also would say leaders who want to improve, they don't have to record a conversation with a teacher. It could be a conversation with a 6-year-old. It could be somebody in their family. It could be anybody. Just say, I want to try this and see what it looks like. They will learn from the video every time.
Yeah, I was reading an article by Tasha Eurich, the organizational psychologist, and she studied 5,000 participants and found that I think it was somewhere around 15% of the participants were truly self-aware. So imagine, 15 out of 100 of us are truly self-aware. And so, yeah, I love your idea. I'm going to try the videotape.
Well, that's why 95% of us feel like we are above average drivers. So, well, Jim, I want to be sensitive to your time. I did have a couple of rapid fire questions here for you, if you're okay.
That's my favorite part.
How far did Kansas get in your brackets?
Well, I didn't do brackets this year, but not a really fair question since our coach wasn't there. Had the coach been there, Connecticut had never beaten Kansas, and Kansas was next in line for UConn. So it's unfortunate that we didn't have our coach, because we probably would have had a different national champion. That's my take on it.
Wow. Spoken like a Jayhawk. Okay. Artificial intelligence.
Gosh, I don't know. I could use some. I don't know what to make of it. It's so far, for me, it's just a novelty, but we'll see where things go. But I'm sure it's here to stay. So I don't know. I think we can fight it all we want, but it's not going away. So I think we better figure out how to use it. That would be my quick response. But I looked up instructional coaching out of curiosity and thought, well, that's not a bad definition. So it is kind of interesting, so, but I will, the real challenge is, what does it mean for creativity, and what does it mean for originality in schools? And so it's going to be interesting. But I remember way back when we had Microsoft Word for the first time, the question was, well, how are they ever going to learn how to spell?
Right.
If they use spell checkers, so it's kind of, maybe we're in the same, at a like 10 times higher level.
And you mentioned one of these before, but I want to pin you down in our last minute or so. You're moving forward, your biggest worry and your greatest hope for public education.
Well, I believe what we're trying to do is disrupt professional learning in schools. And we would say professional learning should start with kids, and what are the changes we want to see in our students, and then go to the teacher, and then identify strategies. We say it's inside out. And when you have a teacher who's trying to hit a powerful goal that they've identified for their students, and they really, really want to hit it, then really good things can happen. But we do it the other way around. We do it outside in. We bring in an expert. They do a workshop. The teachers sit there like, I don't know how I could use this. They're kind of like receptacles to hear the ideas. Then they try to implement it, but it doesn't really fit. They're not really sure. Plus, you start to forget seconds after the workshop's over. And so for me, what gives me hope is the idea that we can start with kids, and then go to teacher and work out from the inside out, not from the outside in. And we can stop doing professional learning that We identify the teachers as resistant. It's not that they're resistant. The design of the professional learning doesn't work. I mean, workshops are good for awareness, but really transforming what happens in classrooms. And I believe truly, if we can start with treating teachers like professionals and start with change from the inside out, then I think there's great things can happen.
Fantastic. So thank you so much, Jim Knight. We will make sure to link to you on the interwebs so folks can find you. Jen, great job as always.
I just want to give one more plug for the book. Even though we were talking about larger things like beliefs, I just want to be clear that the book is organized into 10 habits that build better conversations. And for each of those habits, there's several really concrete strategies. So this is a very concrete book that you can walk away and start practicing these skills tomorrow with videotaping or not. So I encourage you to pick up the book for those concrete strategies.
And not that I'm trying to sell the book, but if a whole school was to focus on how they communicate, it's pretty hard to learn a lot from people you don't trust. But if you can create a positive environment in a school where people, to me, you want to build capacity, it starts with conversation.
There you have it. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jen. Take care. Thanks for listening to this episode of the School Leadership Show, a podcast for aspiring and practicing school leaders. Send your comments, questions, and show ideas to me, Mike, at schoolleadershipshow.com. And please consider rating the podcast in iTunes and leaving a comment. And definitely pass the show along to your colleagues.